Good evening and welcome to another weekly edition of Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I am Ryan Roberts and these are my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Miss Shelley Pruitt. How are you guys doing today?
I still want to see Blake's bench.
Shut the fuck up. I hate you both. I can hate you both.
But we're not here to talk about that tonight.
No, we're not talking about Blake's bench. No. You'll have to go to the Patreon to see that. But tonight we're actually talking about Hans Holzer. Now, I know everybody in the paranormal world knows all about Hans Holzer, and we've actually covered Hans Holzer on the show when Blake did The Devil in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And guys, do you know much else about Hans Holzer other than his investigations into the paranormal?
Well, I'm going to let Shelley speak on this, considering I did a lot of research on him for that one case that I covered.
To be honest, I do not know a whole lot about the man personally. I haven't ever researched his life specifically. I know some of his cases, but not many. So I'm going to get to learn something. And I'm very excited about that.
He's an interesting character, and I'm just hopefully I don't jump anything that you're going to tell us. But what I found out was that I liked his take on a lot of things because he takes a very kind of scientific skeptic point of view from everything, which is kind of the way that I like to take it. You know, like skeptical believer, like I believe in it, but I'm going to have to see it firsthand, really.
Well, and I always like to some of the things that I do know about him is that he did use a trans medium that helped him with a lot of cases, but he wasn't specifically like he would use other psychics and mediums as well.
Absolutely.
And the lady's name is escaping me right now.
Sybil was the most famous that he used.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But he did use many other psychic mediums. Now, he was a paranormal investigator for many years and until the day that he died. So he has a lot of case files and a lot of books that he wrote. Obviously, ever seen the Holzer files on television? If you've ever been to any paranormal section in any bookstore, you have seen a Hans Holzer book, including this big bastard right here, the big book of ghosts.
I got that one
Holzer.
too.
Like it's like literally phone book size. Like this thing is fucking huge. And it's hard to narrow down any of his cases because like he's got so many things that he wrote about and so many things that he did. But tonight I've kind of picked three different stories out of this book because if we were to go through this book, it'd take four freaking ever. So I think we're gonna go ahead and kind of jump in real quick so we go ahead and get started with this this little excursion into Hans Holzer. So Hans Holzer was a trailblazer in his field. Along with the Warrens and Brad Steiger, Hans Holzer was one of the first to take claims of the paranormal in a serious manner and insert himself into locations where high strangeness was abound and investigate them to the fullest extent. And he investigated any and everything on the fringes of what we perceive to be reality. I mean, I'm talking from ghosts to UFOs to aliens to ESP and psychic phenomenon. Now, I bet you didn't know he investigated UFOs, but I found this Hans Holzer book that's all about UFOs. I'll cover later on. But
that was something I was actually interested to learn about him. Was that I didn't realize that he was an alien guy too.
Yeah, I mean, he's covered it all. Like anything you can think of in the paranormal, it fell under his umbrella. Now, his career spanned decades, and he worked tirelessly to make sense of what we could not. He collected stories and cases like one would collect encyclopedias, and these are some of his best stories. Now, the first story we're going to jump into tonight is called the Greenwich Village Ghost. Now, Hans did a lot of work in New York City, and in 1953, he happened to pick up a copy of a local reader called The Park East. And as he thumbed through the pages, he found something that greatly intrigued him. He read an article by Elizabeth Archer, which chronicled the haunting of 51 West 10th Street deep in the heart of Greenwich Village. The home had once been home to the famous New York City architect and painter John Lafarge, who had died in 1910, but in 1944 he seemed to return to his former home and scare the absolute bejesus out of the current residents.
Sorry, I thought you said Lafart at first, and I had to look it up. I'm not gonna lie, listen, that's where my brain's at tonight. I'm sorry. It's gonna be a night. Let's just put it that way.
Good old John Lafart.
Lafart. I'm so sorry. No disrespect, man. That's what my brain heard.
I'm gonna fight you both.
That's what my fucking brain heard. John Lafart. Anyways, go ahead. Lafarge. My bad.
So painter Theodore Rimsky and his wife had went to the opera one evening, but when they returned home, they found a light on in their apartment and that they distinctly remember turning off. and their apartment door was open. So they were scared of who might be in their apartment, but running on pure adrenaline, Rimsky went into the room where the light was on and saw a man standing behind a large chair wearing a black top hat and a dark velvet coat. Now, fearing for his wife, Rimsky told her not to move and ran towards the intruder, who suddenly vanished into thin air, leaving Rimsky confused and terrified. Now, Rimsky and his wife both got over their encounter, but they were still kind of spooked going around their house, kind of knowing that there was someone who had broken in who couldn't be seen or touched. Now, they went about their lives, and Rimsky was curious as just who the spectral intruder could have been. So Rimsky ended up getting a hold of a former owner of the building and telling him about him and his wife's experience. The owner had a few pictures laying around of past tenants of the building, so after listening to Rimsky's story, he broke them out and shared with Rimsky who had lived there previously. As Rimsky thumbed through the old photos, his blood ran cold because right there in the middle of one of the old faded pictures was Rimsky's spooky intruder, John Lafarge. After figuring out...
It's going to happen every time. I'm sorry, I'll stop being a 5-year-old.
John Lafarge.
It's just going to happen every time. So okay, never mind. That answers my question. What I was going to have, because immediately whenever I thought about the top hat, I mean, my head, or my brain went towards like Hat Man.
Hat-Man. That's where my brain went too.
Yeah. Okay. So he was able to match though.
He was, and that was the style of dress in the day that Lafarge would have been walking around in New York City.
Right. Okay.
Now, after figuring out the Spectre's identity, nothing happened in Rimsky's house for about 3 years, until Rimsky and his wife had a few friends over to the house one evening for dinner. One of their guests kept staring at a cabinet on the other side of the room. The guest's wife noticed and asked him, "What are you staring at?" He pointed and said, "Do you not see that man in the top hat over there?" Everyone else turned and looked, and no one else saw him. But he described Lafarge to a T, standing in the corner of the room, to the shock of everyone. But Lafarge didn't just haunt Rimsky and his guests. Just up the stairs from Rimsky was another artist in apartment 22 who was an illustrator named John Allen Maxwell. He would soon also have several encounters of his own with the ghost of Lafarge. One warm night in the spring of 1948, Maxwell called it a night and stripped down naked and crawled into bed.
Uh-oh.
Soon...
Sounds like my night.
That's when they get you.
That is when they get you.
Right, when you ain't got no clothes on. When they
always wear some drawers or something.
Butt ass naked. Not naked, naked. N-E-K-K-I-D. Naked. Naked.
Soon he awoke at about 2 o'clock in the morning with the feeling that he was being watched. And he was not alone in the room. As he cracked his eyes open, he saw the figure of a woman bending down and straightening his sheets.
Oh.
It's like, what the hell? Behind her was a man. And standing beside them. Behind her was a man who was standing beside a wooden filing cabinet at the end of the bed.
Okay.
He opened the cabinet, went through it, and then closed the drawer again. The lady walked over to the man and said something, and walked away into the darkness. The man leaned up against Maxwell's filing cabinet with his head in his hand. And by this time, Maxwell was fully awake and terrified. He thought the two could have been burglars, but couldn't understand just how they got in the apartment, because he knew he had locked the door right before he went to bed, and he locked the door from the inside. So these people should not have been able to get into his apartment undetected.
So we have two spirits. We have a female and a male.
In this particular story, yes.
Okay. I'm with you. I just want to make sure the female wasn't human. Wasn't like the wife, girlfriend, whatever.
Right.
And she was bent over.
She was giving him turn down service.
with him behind her.
Right.
Yeah. So
right. Now Maxwell's fight or flight took over at this point. So he sat straight up out of his bed and yelled, "Put your hands up," while taking a swing at the man at the end of the bed by the filing cabinet. But much to Maxwell's chagrin, as he took a swing, the man vanished into thin air and Maxwell just nailed the filing cabinet closed fist, causing his wrist to hurt. And as Maxwell nursed his hand, it occurred to him that Lafarge and his wife were his unknown visitors. Lafarge had again made his presence known. Maxwell eventually went to. Would you have a question? Sorry.
No, I just find it interesting that it's him and his wife.
Right. It is very interesting.
Hmm.
So Maxwell eventually went to sleep, but never forgot that night. And a little while later, Maxwell had a lady friend come visit him in his apartment. Shortly after she left, she came running back in Maxwell's apartment screaming, that man, over and over again. Maxwell asked her exactly what she was talking about, and she said a man with a cadaver-like face, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, was out in the hallway. And his gone appearance made her scream and come running back into Maxwell's apartment. Maxwell went outside and checked the hall and saw nothing and just chalked it up to another appearance of Lafarge. Now, all these stories greatly intrigued Hans Holzer. He wanted to investigate and check it out for himself. So he got a group of parapsychology students and the author of the article, Elizabeth Archer, and a psychic medium named Ethel Myers all together, and they ventured over to the site of the hauntings. Now, Hans, the students, Myers, and Archer walked into the apartment where they all joined hands and began to perform a seance. As Myers fell into her medium trance, she began to connect with a very powerful spirit of a woman who fell out of a window in the building some years earlier. Myers paused and told Holzer if she went into her trance, she would have a strong urge to go out that window. So if she stood up or moved, to grab her and prevent her from jumping out. Myers slipped back into her trance right afterwards and said she was seeing a man with sharp features coming through. Myers described Lafarge again to a T, and suddenly a man's voice emanated from Myers' mouth. The gruff voice told everyone to get out of his house. Holzer tried to calm the spirit by saying that they were friends, and they were in the house to help the spirit. The man's voice, who everyone figured was Lafarge, said it didn't have any friends. And Holzer once again reiterated they were friends and here to help. But the gruff voice responded, I want help, but not from you. Holzer was taken aback, but tried to get the spirit's name. However, the spirit wouldn't give it up. So Holzer changed tactics. He asked who the President of the United States was, seeing if he could match the spirit to a particular time period. The voice replied, William McKinley. I knew him and met him in Boston many years ago. The voice paused and once again exclaimed, Who are you? I am in my house. Hans again asked for its name. The spirit said it couldn't remember its name, but it could remember McKinley's. It said a few more things, but became weak and faded away. Myers awoke from her trance, and Holzer asked Archer a few questions about the building. Archer was astonished at what she had just witnessed. Holzer asked her about the woman that had come through in the beginning of the seance, before the spirit of Lafarge came through. And Archer said that a young girl did in fact die in the house and go out of one of the windows way back in the day, but didn't mention it in the article because it had nothing to do with the Lafarge story. But she was blown away that the medium was picking up on it, and with no more answers available on Lafarge or the girl who went out the window, Holzer and the group left the apartment, but Lafarge was spotted at least one more time. Soon after Holzer's seance, the building was torn down and a new apartment building was built in its place. One rainy afternoon, a lady was walking down the street right past the haunted apartment building, and there, leaning up against the wall, was a man dressed to the nines as if he was going to the opera. The woman exclaimed to the man, My, you're a funny-looking man. The man looked back at her and said, Madam, how dare you?
Sounds like the way I flirt.
Wanna have
funny looking. No.
I want to have that kind of interaction with the spirit. How dare you,
Madam, how dare you? And with that, he turned and walked directly back into the side of the building, causing the woman to faint, and several good Samaritans had to come and bring her back to the land of the living. And that is the story of Lafarge's ghost in Greenwich Village.
I'm just gonna start saying that to y'all, and then just walking out of a room at an investigation, just look at Shelley, just be like, "Madam, How dare you? Just walk away. That's it.
Wouldn't be the worst thing you've said to me.
Yeah, with a REM pod in a spirit box. Madam, how dare you?
How dare you? So what do y'all think of that story?
I think it's interesting that there are two spirits that were visible,
right?
That chose to show themselves, and I don't know if the female spirit would have been necessarily an intelligent haunting, because the straightening the sheets, the going about the daily household business, that seems to me like that might be residual.
I think you're right.
But to have both of them show up,
but it would be interesting though if she were residual, because it seemed to me that the male spirit seemed to be intelligent because he was able to go through the file cabinet and close the drawer and all that. So having a residual spirit and an intelligent spirit show up at the same time together is pretty interesting to me.
And it lends some legitimacy that people that probably didn't necessarily know each other are having experiences with the same entity, spirit, ghost, whatever you want to call it. That's interesting. You're getting validation from sources that didn't know anything. They didn't know each other. The lady walking by the street didn't likely didn't know the other two, residents of the apartment. So that's interesting.
Well, that's so there was no other interaction between not just with like Hans or the people that live there and stuff, but the actual two spirits. There's no additional interaction between them that has been reported.
No, just that in the story. That doesn't mean there wasn't more,
right?
But that was all that was in the story.
But you did say that one of them was an artist, correct?
Both of them were artists.
Both of them were artists.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting to me too, because
himself was an artist too. So.
Yeah. Because a lot of people, there's some theories that go around that say that your creative brain, those of you that are extra creative, that have the ability to sing, to paint, to do all that kind of stuff, that they tend to have more experiences with, spiritual interactions.
Like they're tapped into something completely.
Yes, they're on a different frequency level, for lack of a better word.
That is interesting. I mean, I think a lot of us that are in this field are creative types, and I think that if that's the case, that is very interesting.
Well, if you think about the just to jump a topic real quick, when we did Robert the Doll, the man who owned Robert was a painter. So I don't know. This is interesting. Now my mind's going. I'm trying to think back of all the stories we've done, and how many of those people actually had a creative outlet that they maybe made money from or were known for. So
well, I think there's been a lot of rock stars that have had encounters with the paranormal. There's been a lot of authors, painters. Maybe you are tapped into something completely different or operating on a different wavelength. Who knows?
So whenever Hans was having the interaction, it was through his medium, his trance medium, right? Okay.
Yeah. Because she went to the trance, and that's who they were talking to. Lafarge.
I mean, did it get Lafarge? Did it give anything additional? Like, what was over what his thoughts of it were? Because I always find his take on these types of hauntings to be a interesting,
unique too. There's.
Because he really does take a very scientific kind of turn. Like, I mean, I was researching the devil in Texas that he covered in Tyler, Texas, it was just like, okay, we're talking about like barometer pressure and the way that the wind was blowing and the temperature outside and all this kind of shit.
Right.
So I was just curious about.
No, he didn't. He was just talking about how he was curious about it. And maybe he didn't have enough time to go and do a formal investigation other than having the seance that night. Gotcha. He didn't really talk about that. He just kind of told the story of Lafarge and about him scaring the lady at the end. So
okay, I mean, because I don't think it's weird or interesting that any different than there is in another haunted building, that there's an intelligent and a residual spirit together. I mean, we have that all the time wherever we go.
I'm just saying showing up at the same time.
But that's what I was gonna say. Like showing up at the same time. That is interesting.
Right.
Because I would. It makes me wonder if she is residual. That's a whole different level that I've never thought of an intelligent haunting, a spirit that is actually able to see, interact, and I don't know, maybe I don't want to use the word manipulate, but like a residual haunting. You know?
He did say that she was trying to adjust his sheets, so maybe she just thought his bed was messy because she didn't interact with his sheets, and she interacted with the ghost of Lafarge at the end of the bed as well.
Yeah, but to me that does scream kind of residual, because I mean that's something she did all the time. I mean that energy could just be imprinted in that environment, and she's just going to smooth the sheets out and all that stuff. But
it's something she did probably every day. Yeah, so that's imprinted on the environment.
Yeah, I could see that. I guess you're right. But I don't know. It's just interesting that, like you said, that you have Lafarge at the end appearing, and she appears at the same time. He can manipulate the filing cabinet, and she's straightening the sheets, but he seems to be more intelligent versus her. I don't know. I mean, there's no way you can go and investigate because the building got torn down and another building got built over the top of it. But I imagine they're probably still having.
They're probably. I mean, I'm sure that they're still there. Yeah. I don't know. It just I've never thought of that. I don't think I've ever thought about like as an investigator, the intelligent. We interact with residual hauntings and intelligent hauntings, but I've never actually sat down and thought of, can an intelligent haunting and a residual haunting interact with one another?
Yeah, I haven't either. That is, I don't know. I
in that case, wouldn't they both be intelligent? Because a residual is like a scar. It's over and over and over again. It's not. It has no interest in interacting. It's an imprint.
Right.
So why would it interact with something that was intelligent, that is conscious of its surroundings, for lack of better words, conscious of its surroundings, conscious of the activity around it? And if the residual isn't, they aren't necessarily going to be conscious of that intelligent spirit. So then they would both have to be intelligent. You're kind of, I mean, it can't, if they're interacting, they both have to have some form of intelligence, right? That would be my thought.
Well,
you said all she did was smooth the bed sheets, though, right?
Yeah,
that was it, right?
Adjusting the bed sheets. Yeah.
She didn't acknowledge the man that's there, the man spirit. So that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so
she could be. No. She did acknowledge.
Oh, she did acknowledge.
Spirit. Yeah, remember.
Shit, she's intelligent then. Okay, yeah. Sorry,
and then walked off into the night. But
unless she usually bitched at him after she smoothed the sheets, like I told you, off the bed. And in that case, that's probably imprinted.
You asshole! Yeah, that's probably
interesting thing to think about.
So that one was that was the first story, kind of like the appetizer. But this one, Shelley, I think you're really going to dig.
Oh, I'm in. I'm ready.
Yes. So. Now, this one is called The Devil in the Flesh.
Why am I going to be interested in it?
It's your boyfriend, baby.
Yeah,
it's my boyfriend, the devil. Okay.
Absolutely. Okay, so now everybody has had that ex. You know, the one that won't leave you alone.
Oh, geez, here we go.
No matter how many times you tell them that you're done, they won't take no for an answer. And they
Why are you trying to traumatize me right here, right now? Why are you doing this to me?
No, I think you're gonna like this because there's a powerful woman in this story. So now they won't take no.
That one too.
Now they won't take no for an answer, and they bother you at the most inconvenient times. It seems like no matter what, you just can't seem to shake them, and you just hope that they lose interest and fade away and leave you be.
Still hoping.
Now imagine that situation was happening to you from beyond the grave, after your ex had passed on.
Fucking hell, right? Just take the little glimmer of fucking hope she has, man, and just
leave me with that much hope.
Just shatter it. God, you're an asshole.
Yeah, he's trying to do some damage to me right now.
Damn. All right.
Now that's exactly the situation that a Mrs. G from Kansas City found herself in. And she wrote Hans Holzer to tell him about her ordeal. Now, Mrs. G grew up in Kansas City, and she lived a pretty normal life. She wasn't a very spiritual person and didn't really concern herself too much on whether or not there was an afterlife. Mrs. G was more business-minded, and at 19, she met and married Mr. G. The couple had no children and ran a gasoline business. Everything was smooth sailing. Miss G worked with her husband for about 30 years, but when she hit the age of 49, she decided she had had enough and thought that maybe she should slow down and stop and smell the roses for a little bit. So she pulled back from the gas business and decided to enjoy life a little bit more. Now, while she was enjoying her semi-retirement, a friend dropped by her house and suggested they try something new. Her friend said she was reading in the paper and she came across an ad for a spiritualist church in the area who was having an open house that evening. and they were inviting the public to come by and attend service. Now, Miss G wasn't really into that sort of thing, but she figured, what the hell, it sounds like fun. So, that very night, Mrs. G and the friend attended the service. Now, they went in expecting a dark and spooky seance room like they had seen in the movies. But instead, they found themselves with a group of kind and very sincere people. But while there, the two overheard a conversation where one person said to the other, quote, "He came to me on the Ouija board." And as Miss G got back home, she laughed off the statement. Come on, she thought. The Ouija board? That was a kid's toy. But in the coming days, her curiosity got the best of her. And she went down to the store and bought one for herself. Now, what harm could it do? She thought to herself. And worst case scenario, she'd waste an afternoon playing with it. Exactly. That's why we don't fuck with them. She'd waste an afternoon just playing with it when she was at home alone and had time to herself. So she busted out the board and began to play. As soon as she put her hands down on the planchette, she could feel it vibrate with energy, and the planchette began to move. All by itself. And it began to spell out the words after a few minutes. Mrs. G felt like an outside source was pushing her hands over the letters that she did not select. And soon it spelled out something she absolutely did not want to see. It spelled out, "Hello, this is John W." Now, John W. was somebody she knew well. He was a former suitor that worshipped the ground she walked on. But she had dismissed him earlier in her life. She hadn't spoken to him in years, but had heard he had died a sad man at the age of 54 from heart failure. The message on the board spooked her, so she hastily put it away. When she said she wanted to try new things, this wasn't what she meant, and this was not the path that she wanted to go down. But even after she put it away, the temptation of the board became too great. And Miss G picked it up again. And like clockwork, the board picked up where it left off. It spelled out, "I want to be with you always." And then told her how much John W. loved her. But it also told her how much But it also told him how much she had hurt him in his life. And it didn't understand, and she did not understand just how much that he actually loved her. Mrs. G just listened to John W., quote unquote, go on for hours, and soon weeks had passed, and Miss G continued to listen to the board. After weeks of consorting with John W., Mrs. G's demeanor began to change. She became moody and depressed, and wasn't acting like herself. Her husband noticed the change and asked her if she was okay. She wanted to tell him the truth, but she was just scared that it would hurt him and hurt her marriage if she was forthcoming about what she'd been doing. And besides, who would believe her? She was talking to a dead ex using a board game. I mean, she's not wrong. Funny. So she lied and said yes. She said that she had just been feeling down lately, and her husband bought it and left her be, hoping she would feel better soon. But she wasn't getting any better. The Ouija sessions continued, and now not only was she talking to John W. on the board, she began to hear John W.'s voice throughout the day.
Oh, fuck no.
Mm-hmm. Coming from both inside her head and outside of her head, and within whatever room she was in. He would say things like, "I am with you," periodically to let her know that she had no privacy, and he had access to her anytime he damn well pleased.
That's like the internet today.
I'm with you always. By this time, she'd had enough. She thought if she got rid of the wretched object that started the entire thing, everything would stop, and things would go back to normal. But they did not. Despite tossing the board into the trash, John W. stuck around and became even more brazen with his attempts to communicate with Miss G. She could still feel his presence throughout the day, and she began having trouble sleeping. It was also at about this time that when she went to bed at night, she was not alone in her bed like she had intended. Because as she lay down at night, she could feel John W.'s presence extremely close to her body.
Mm-mm.
One night, as she was trying to sleep, she felt his presence right on top of her. So she reached out to wave him off, and when she did, she felt something other than air. It startled her so bad that she screamed and sat up in bed and turned on the light. Finding nothing but a startled husband, she woke with her scream. He asked her what was wrong, and she said nothing, just a nightmare. And the couple went back to sleep.
You pull up the covers because they're magic.
But John W.'s late night advances continued for weeks. Every night she felt his ethereal body either on top of her or beside her.
No, Tom, get off. No.
That's what he was trying to do.
Yeah, I think so. From beyond the grave.
I'm sorry, you just set that one up.
I did. Sorry, it was my fault.
This
is actually upsetting me. You better talk faster and get through the story.
It was as if he was trying to get what he was denied from her in life. Any kind of physical contact with her by any means necessary.
Nasty.
Yeah, he's a real creepy ghost. She fought him off as best as she could, but still, night after night, he returned. And when his physical advances didn't work, John W. became more menacing. And he started threatening Mrs. G and told her if she didn't accept him willingly, he would do all kinds of unspeakable things to her and her husband. So she finally figured that she had to tell her husband about what had been happening. She couldn't bear the thought of something terrible happening to him, so she came clean and told him all about the board and the voices and what John W. had been doing. Her husband listened intently and said, terrible. We've got to get you out of this.
That's a good man.
Yes,
right there.
Absolutely.
That's a good man.
She sat there and listened to him. So Miss G was so relieved and she knew she could count on her husband. But just to make sure she was healthy and there wasn't something wrong with her and going on inside of her brain, she told him she was going to go to the doctor and she booked herself an appointment. And when she did, she got a clean bill of health. But just to be safe, she got an EEG brain scan and a psychological evaluation, which also came back great with no issues. But while she was getting herself in order, John W. kept attacking her. He continued to threaten her and tell her things like, "You will always hear my voice, and you will never get rid of me." But she knew she had to. And finally one night, as she lay in bed, she felt part of his body enter into hers, and suddenly felt her heart being squeezed from inside of her chest, as if she was having a heart attack, which was the exact cause of John W.'s death. The pain subsided, but early the next morning, she went to the doctor and asked him to examine her heart. Nothing was wrong with it. The revelation really scared Mrs. G. If this spirit was powerful enough to make her feel that kind of pain, it was powerful enough to follow through on the threats it made to her and her husband. This thing had to go. So she sought the help from a hypnotist in New York City and traveled there to have him help her out. And he tried to help her get rid of the unwanted visitor. The hypnotist put her under, and it was no time before John W. reared his ugly head and began to speak directly to the hypnotist through Mrs. G. He told the hypnotist, "I want her to go with me. She is all I have now." And then said, "I told her she made my life hell for me, and now I'll make her life hell for her." Confused, the hypnotist asked, "Why?" John W. replied with, "No one wants me. No one wanted me as a kid. My grandparents didn't want me. She could have made me happy, but she didn't want to." The hypnotist asked, "Then why force yourself on her?" The spirit replied, "I force myself on her because I can make her miserable. She hates me now anyway, but I'm going to take her with me. I'll get her one way or another." The hypnotist urged the spirit to move on, but the spirit insisted that it couldn't and was confused. But then the hypnotist explained that there was freedom on the other side. The voice hesitated for a bit and said it would go, if only he could return and visit Mrs. G every now and again. The hypnotist wasn't so sure about that. But then the spirit turned on a dime and exclaimed, "I'm not leaving. I can do anything with her I couldn't do when I was living." The hypnotist lost his patience, and he told the spirit to leave and no longer bother Miss G, or it would rot in eternal damnation. The spirit said, "I won't go." But the hypnotist said, "You will go, and the psychic door to you is closed." A few moments later, Mrs. G awoke, hoping she was rid of the spirit. But when she returned home, John W. was still on the prowl, and he was still attacking her nightly.
Well, yeah, you went to a hypnotist.
Yeah, what's he gonna do?
Yeah, I'm sorry, like you're not allowed in her body anymore.
Not anymore.
Like,
go away.
When I snap my fingers, you will be gone.
You will disappear. Yeah,
Be
right.
gone, Satan. I don't think it works that way. I think it needs a little more power behind it.
Right, not with just the hypnotist. Maybe if you want to stop
Shotgun
smoking.
full of salt. Be gone.
Yeah, maybe if you want to stop smoking, but not to get rid of a spirit. But Miss G had one more trick up her sleeve. She began to treat the spirit with indifference, not really caring about it. And soon the hold he had over her just dissipated. And the last Hans Holzer heard, she and her husband were living a nice, quiet life in Kansas City. And that is the end of The Devil in the Flesh.
I have questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Number one, why hypnotists?
I don't know. I guess she was desperate. That's who she went to.
Maybe that's who she thought could help.
Yeah,
I guess. Yeah.
Because
what year was that?
I believe it's in the 60s, and this is a letter that she wrote Holzer about what had happened. So maybe the hypnotist was the only person that she knew could help her. Maybe Holzer was too busy to help her. I don't know.
I'm just trying to think of when psychology became a little bit more.
It was 60s or 70s.
Yeah, it was somewhere around in that time.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand why she went to a hypnotist. Obviously, we're just going to go ahead and tell our people who are watching or listening, don't go to a hypnotist. Find somebody who knows a little bit more in depth about the paranormal and whether, a priest, ordained minister.
What have you?
Yeah, what have you?
Anyone other than a hypnotist. But I do find it interesting,
ordained minister, paranormal investigator, and then your dog, and then a hypnotist.
What is interesting about that story, though, that I do find interesting, is that she was giving him all that attention. And since she was giving him all that attention, he seemed to be able to have that power in order to do whatever he wanted to her. But as soon as she was like, "I'm just going to ignore you," he dissipated and went away because he didn't have that energy to draw from her. She wasn't giving him the time of day anymore. So that whatever he was using to feed off of her, that connection was severed, and he just withered and went over wherever the hell he went. But that's why
that doesn't work for all of them.
I was gonna say, yeah. I mean, that doesn't work for all of them. I
right.
mean, it's interesting in that case. I mean, I'm sure at some point we've all heard something like, if you got something going on, like, don't acknowledge it.
Right. So how many times have we said that to people? Like, if you have something in your house, you see something, and if you don't want anything going on in your house, don't acknowledge whatever happens. Just go about your day and ignore it. But
but that doesn't work all the time.
That doesn't work all the time either.
No.
I don't know. I mean, should I ignore crap all the time? But then again, we are paranormal investigators, and I bring crap home with me all the time. So that's a good point that was just made in the comments. Almost makes me wonder if she was manifesting him.
Could have been. I don't know.
The whole idea of her picking up a spirit board and messing with it by herself, which I don't ever recommend that. What if something happens to you and somebody needs to be there to know that you're not behaving as yourself if something does happen? But that's interesting to me that she picks up the spirit board just for fun, to play. And I think that's where a lot of people get in trouble. You're knocking on a door. You don't know who's on the other side. If you don't know how to properly open and close it, there are plenty of people that use them and use them well. But if you don't know how to open it and close it and don't play, you get into a lot of trouble. You can get yourself into a lot of trouble by just playing. Get somebody who knows what they're doing if you really want to see what it's like and experience it. But yeah, she's playing with spirit board.
That's the hardest part about them, though, is because they're marketed as a game,
a toy.
Yeah, Park Brothers.
Fun. What does it say? Fun for the whole family, living in debt. And it's kind of like, I don't know. Whenever before I really got into the investigation aspect of what we do, I used to have a misconceived or whatever preconceived notion. That's what I was going for. That all Ouija boards are bad, and that any type of communication tool like that, a Ouija board, was bad. That's not the case. Mm-hmm. It is proper knowledge of how to use it. I mean, if you are just sitting there doing like, I'm just going to play with this because it's a game, and you're just like, is anybody there? Chances are something could come through. It's a door and anything can knock. I mean, anything can answer when you knock. So,
But do you think it really just depends on the person, honestly? Because I don't think her friend may have done the same thing, but nothing is ever said about her friend having any sort of experiences like that.
Well, we also don't know what her friend's background was.
We don't. That's true.
Well, I don't think that I don't think she would have ever set out, and this is just me, I don't think she would have ever set out to contact someone who had bothered her in general.
Right.
Most women tend to shy away from being stalked. So I don't think she would be making an intentional effort.
Right.
I think she was playing, and that just happened to be what was interesting. Could she have been manifesting it? Could it have been exciting to get a name that she recognized? Of course. Mm-hmm. Could it have been exciting that when it revealed who it revealed to be, that she was interested in why is this deceased person that I used to know who used to follow me around, why is he coming through? Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. But at a certain point, you have to stop. You have to stop playing with it. You have to stop playing with the board. You have to stop messing around with communication, especially if you're uncomfortable. And she should have said right off the bat, something is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think here's the thing with Ouija boards. I mean, okay, so I had somebody that I knew whenever I was younger, probably around like 15 or 16, like call me hysterically crying and was like, oh my God, I just did a Ouija board session with, so-and-so, and you're going to die at 27 in a car wreck. That's what it told me. And I'm like, okay, whatever, fine. Here I am, 35. Okay, number one. Still here as far as I'm aware.
Right. Yeah.
I knocked on some wood for you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Appreciate it. Because I can't knock her. The dog will go crazy. But also in that sense, like if you get them and you do a little bit of research, because if you get them, you start playing with them and everything like that, you do get a name, let's say, or something like that, or something happens where it's like, holy shit, this is insane. Just be diligent about it. There is a reason why none of the three of us on this screen try to talk to our relatives that have passed.
Nope.
Is because again, you're open. Now, do they come to us every now and then?
Yeah.
Well, for me, they do. When I'm reading spirit dice, that's another thing. I read spirit dice, but I've taken the time to learn how to open and how to close something properly with what I'm comfortable with doing. Mm-hmm. So, and then protection aspects and stuff. So,
with any tool you use to communicate, it's not about the tool that you're using. It's about the intention behind it. What is your intention? Mm-hmm. Are you using it properly? Are you just playing? Because I have to tell you, if you walked in my house and I'm a spirit and you're trying to communicate with me and you're just dicking around, things are going to get bad for you. Just because they're going to get bad for you. So yeah, I think it's intention and setting your intent and being respectful. And if they want to, I think it's never just the tool, it's the operator.
Right.
Yeah. So it says comments say, now what happens when the thing on the board, when the planchette on the board moves by itself, when nobody's touching
you burn it.
Right.
Time to call a freaking priest. Right. Something. Close it down. Time to get rid of it. Exercise that bitch.
Absolutely. It's just good practice not to mess with them in the first place. I mean, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I would advise against it.
And that's the thing. I'm not going to sit here and say that Ouija boards are the sole door to the
you can communicate a whole lot of other ways.
Or whatever. Yeah, you can communicate.
Right.
But it's just one of those things that, do we see a lot of cases of poltergeist activity or exorcism that had to take place when we're doing all this research, negativity type stuff that are centered around like a Ouija boards or something along the lines, a summoning board of some sorts?
Right.
Yes. But here's also the kicker. You got to play into a lot of the other aspects of who is the operator. Most times it is a teenager who is typically more often than not female that we've seen the most. And we know that is one demographic that poltergeists seem to just glue to, So anyways, yeah.
Well, and again, there is no real difference between using a spirit box or spirit dice or a Ouija board. There really isn't. However, we do like you said that we see a lot more cases of bad things happening with an Ouija board. But if you think about it, that's probably the oldest device that's still in use that is still being used. So of course, there's more examples of the cases purely for the fact that it's been around longer.
Talking boards.
So okay, well then, what do you think makes a Ouija board more susceptible to that sort of thing versus a spirit box?
I think it's the thought behind them, honestly. I think what I mean by that is that if you think about it, I think the reason why we have a lot of negative cases that are centered around Ouija boards, kind of like this one, is the fact that you are priming yourself and you have this preconceived notion. This is what to expect. Something negative, something evil comes from this thing, and then you grab it, you start talking to it because you're playing around, and then all of a sudden that's what shows up.
That's your intention, right? And so that's what you receive.
Exactly. It's all about the intention that's behind it. So if you walk into it going, oh, these things are all bad, nothing but negativity comes from them, demonic things come from them. If you go into it with that intent and that mindset, and you're physically touching that board with that energy and that mindset, you might attract something like that. So it's probably a reason why we see a lot of the negativity and demonic cases arising out of Ouija boards, even though I don't believe Ouija boards are inherently evil to begin with.
Right. But do you think that has something to do with more of like, it's like using like I always say, using an Ouija board is more of a ritualistic thing, because like you're with people, you're holding hands on the planchette, you're all moving it together, you're all doing it, versus a spirit box.
Well, that's a collective energy, and you better make sure that the people you're sitting in that collective circle with have got their shit tuned right that day.
Right.
Because you sit down with, say 4 people, and one of them's just had an argument with their husband, and another man had an argument with his boss that day. One of y'all's just in a bad mood, like me, ready to fight. And you sit down and then you're sitting there with real good intentions.
Right.
You have 3 collective negative feelings going into that. So it's probably going to outweigh whatever positive you may have going in. So like anything, if you go into an investigation, your head's not screwed on right, or you're out of focus, or you can't shut out the day and walk in, as blank slate with as good of energy as you can, you can't expect to get really good results or always positive results.
Yeah.
True. Well, I mean, if you're asking me though, I just choose not to use them. Do whatever you want, but
to me personally, they don't bother me. I mean, because what's the difference between a freaking Ouija board and a thing of spirit dice?
There isn't any difference. You're still knocking on a door and asking for an answer.
And I have to set it up very kind of ritualistically as you would open a Ouija board. So there really is no difference. That's why I don't see them as inherently evil.
Perhaps the difference is... Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I do think there is a difference with just what Shelley just said. It's collective energy versus individual energy. You have more people focusing their energy and intent on something versus one person. So there's more of a chance that something negative could come through when you have multiple people focusing their energy versus just the one person.
Yeah, well, I'm doing like one-on-one. I mean, if somebody by themselves solo is working with a Ouija board, which again, I don't see anything inherently wrong with. If that is your tool, do it. If you're comfortable with it, do it. It's the same thing with opening the spirit dice. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So we could go. Yeah, we could go on and on all night about a Ouija board.
We've had this discussion.
I think that there's just a huge misconception about them. But this case is interesting because it happens. Typically, you hear. I was waiting for you to be like, "Oh, it's a demonic entity, and she had to have an exorcism." Stuff. That's what I was waiting for, because that's what I was expecting. Because in my head, when I heard, "Oh, John W. said hi," I was like, "Oh, it's a freaking mimic." A mimic's coming there or something along the lines. That's what I was expecting. But I have never heard of a ex-boyfriend,
a stalker from beyond the grave. They exist, right?
Right. Moral of the story is, just know what the hell you're doing before you start messing with any sort of summoning tools or anything. And don't summon your stalkers, yes. Make sure they stay buried.
Damn.
Right.
Is that one of those things where you can go like put the nail through or whatever it is? I don't know.
What like a fetish doll?
No. Where did fetish go?
Where the fuck did that come from, you weirdo?
I was thinking like the vampires,
put the nail through something. Like that's what they're called, like the dolls with the nails in them, and from Africa.
I'm talking about in the coffins, what they do to keep vampires from rising up in Hungary and Romania and stuff.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
nobody say anything about fetishes, weirdo. Move on to your next story.
No, you know what a fucking fetish doll is. You know exactly.
No, I
what
don't.
It is.
You
yes,
tell
you
me.
do. You've been to Ripley's Believe It or Not. You've seen them.
No, I haven't.
It's a little African idol that they use in like voodoo rituals with the iron nail that they hammer into them. So you know what it is, you fucking weirdo. So anyway,
we just wanted to hear you explain
I just want
it a
your
little bit.
explanation.
There's a different type of fetish doll, but that's for a different program. Anyway,
do tell.
Get on the Patreon and find out. Now, Blake, I think you're really going to dig this next one.
God, Ryan, don't start with these because Shelley's turned out to be a hell of a fucking story. That just tell your fucking story.
So next time you're trying to sell a house, think about this story.
Oh, God.
All right, so people move in and out of houses all the time, especially with rental properties. When you move into a new place, you never know what the previous tenants did in the home, or if there was a death in the house.
You never know what they did.
You just go about your day and you try to live the best you can, but occasionally you may move into a house with unruly spirits hell-bent on letting you know that they're there and they're not leaving.
Show us on the stall where you like to be touched, right?
I take all day. And they aren't going anywhere, or they're not leaving anytime soon. This is a lesson that Helen L. knows all too well. And trying to make sense of it all, she wrote to Hans Holzer seeking his help and perspective and trying to get a little peace in the place that she liked to call home. It all started when Hans Holzer went on television in December of 1963. Helen saw his appearance and decided to drop him a line, telling him about strange events in and around her home, and also to see if he could help her. She and Holzer started a correspondence so Holzer could get a feel for what he may be walking into. Helen wrote Hans and said that she lived in a haunted house on Ardmore Boulevard in Los Angeles, and she needed his help, so she wrote him this letter. She said that she had been in bed at about 9:30 the previous evening and heard a champagne bottle being popped open right next to her head. But she knew it wasn't her because she hadn't popped the bottle, and the sound was so clear that she also heard the champagne being poured into a glass right beside her. However, no one else was in the home, and she couldn't find the source of the strange noise. The strange incident really piqued Holzer's curiosity. So Holzer immediately called her, and he called her and he said, it was going to be a while before he was going to be in Los Angeles. So if she could she write him a letter and tell him exactly what was going on in the home? And if anything else happened, could she write him more letters to let him know what was happening? And as he got on the phone call, he got a really good feel for Helen L. because her personality seemed to kind of mesh with what he was trying to do. And she even asked him, please don't talk about where I live. Like, don't publish it. Don't give my exact address. And she seemed educated and she wasn't over enthusiastic and she was very matter of fact. So Holzer thought it was a good idea to continue to correspond with her and figure out what was going on in her house. Now, he said that it would be a bit before he was able to get back to LA from New York City. So please continue to write the letters and let me know what was going on in the home. Now, a few days later, on January the 23rd, 1964, Holzer received her letter detailing everything that was going on up until that point. Her mother had bought the home about 38 years previously to move Helen and her two sisters out to California from the Midwest. But a few years after they moved out, Helen's mother almost lost everything, so she moved the family out and rented the home out to several different tenants. After a couple about 8 years later had a big fist fight within the home, Helen's mother got them out and moved her family and moved Helen and her sisters back in. And things were quiet at first, but then all of a sudden several things began to pop off in the home. One night when Helen was 20, she was at home all alone writing a letter in her bedroom. Suddenly, her French doors leading out to the patio from her room began to rattle violently as if someone was trying to get in. But when she looked out the door, she saw no one. The next morning, she remembered the patio had just been painted, and surely if someone had gotten onto the porch and rattled her doors, they would have left footprints behind. But when she stuck her head outside to look for the footprints, the paint on the porch was undisturbed. Later on, the taps began in her room. A few years after the rattling of the doors, something began to tap on Helen's furniture as she sat down in bed at night at the end of the day. Something would make its rounds and tap 2 to 3 times on every single piece of Helen's furniture, over and over again, until Helen became frustrated and yelled at it to knock it off. Which
that's a Shelley move right now. Shut the fuck up! I'm trying
get the fuck out of here! Leave me alone.
Well, my imp does that, but yeah, I tell him to knock it off. The second one, I'm like, hey, knock it off.
Okay, so I'm not gonna lie. This is a little unnerving because this is no, I have no idea what I'm about to tell you. This is kind of paralleling some current experiences.
Really?
Yeah.
You got taps going on?
I have taps and I have vibrations on door, like not like violently, like somebody's trying to break in, but I will hear every now and then, like it sounds like the door like rattles or gets pushed forward or pulled back or something like that.
Okay, that's interesting.
I'm a little nervous right now.
Yeah, let's let
here by myself.
Blake right on the coals now. Go ahead.
So when she would do this, it would only work temporarily, and the offending entity would always return again and start the process all over again. The childish pranks and general mischief of these encounters would be very benign compared to what happened next. One night, Helen fell asleep laying on her left side, but woke up in the middle of the night lying on her belly and trying to breathe. Something was holding her down and pushing her face deeper and deeper into her pillow. She tried to scream and fight it off, but could not. And just when she was about to pass out, the pressure released and she was able to breathe. The scenario happened 3 times in total, and each time the ordeal would last just a little bit longer, until Helen began to sleep with her lights on, which seemed to ward off the late night suffocator. After the late night so be careful. Blake, let's hope that doesn't start happening to you.
Wait, she's attempted to be like this thing's attempting to suffocate her?
Yeah, it was pushing her head into the pillow as she was asleep on her stomach.
Oh, fuck that. Where's my protection? That's the route we go on. I don't have to wear every fucking piece of it. No, I don't wear mine. I've been wearing mine the last couple of weeks. Because it rattles so much and then it makes noise and I distract people who are listening. It's all for you people. I'm putting myself in harm's way just so you don't have to hear my necklaces rattle.
Oh, Blake is so put upon, let me tell you. Now, after the late night struggles, Helen began hearing whistling outside of the house in the yard, which seemed to be calling for her to come out, but she never attempted to step out when the whistle showed up. I wouldn't either. One night, Helen got up to go to the bathroom, and as she sat on the toilet, she began to hear the sounds of an intense fight coming from inside the living room. She finished her business and sat in the room listening to the brawl in the living room, trying to muster up the courage to open up the door. And when Helen finally did open up the door, it was deadly silent, and the fighting had immediately stopped. Helen was utterly confused and just as spooked, but that wasn't it for the phantom fighting. A few months later, Helen, her mother, and her sister were woken in the middle of the night to the sounds of a vicious fight right outside on their patio. It sounded like the furniture was being broken in half and torn to pieces. But just as soon as it started, within a few minutes, it was over. The startled women went back to bed and went out to survey the damage the next morning. And much to their surprise, everything was intact as if nothing had ever happened. Helen continued with her letter. Oh, was that noise? Continued with her letter and told Holzer.
Did y'all hear that?
Yeah, what was that?
I don't know.
Dude, it sounded
Continue
like...
with your...
Okay, on my end, it sounded like someone was talking. Like...
Yeah, I heard what sounded like...
I'm like,
female's voice.
If you can see, I don't have my headphone all the way on my ear.
Okay.
Let me do this. Let me do it like this.
It sounded like a soft voice talking on my end. I don't know. That was weird.
Go ahead.
So Helen continued with her letter and told Holzer that the haunting wasn't just confined to the house. A few relatives had visited the home, so Helen's mother and sister slept out in the garage for a few days. And every night, they were both woken up by a man's heavy footsteps walking to the garage door and stopping suddenly. Although they heard the footsteps approach, they never heard them walk away. Not long after her mother and sister heard the footsteps, Helen also heard them. One night, she was sitting in the den off of the back of the house when suddenly she heard the man's heavy footsteps clip-clopping down the sidewalk right beside the den's window, and then suddenly stop, validating what her mother and sister had heard in the garage. Finally, around mid-April, Holzer was able to make his return trip back to LA and was planning to be there on the 16th. But before he left for LA, he received another letter on the 9th where Helen described her mother and sister being awakened at around 3 a.m. for a few nights by the sound of a woman's clicking heels running down the driveway. So now another spirit was making itself known. Holzer was going to have his hands full. Holzer got to LA on the 16th, but wasn't able to make it over to Helen's house until the following day. And with him, he brought Dick Symington, a businessman that was interested in psychic phenomenon and a member of the American Society for Psychical Research. And he brought a psychic medium named Miss Maxine Bell. Helen let the trio into the house, and they walked through, and Miss Bell came out with what she felt. Miss Bell said a Philip Stengel had died in the house in 1934. But the name didn't ring any bells for Helen. But she also didn't know the names of her mom's previous tenants that had rented out the home throughout the years. Mrs. Bell stopped and said, a person was murdered here in 1948. 2 men got into a heated argument outside in the driveway. One of them was wounded in the abdomen and was carted away while the other man stayed and never left the house. Perhaps his anger had trapped him there. Miss Bell also said she felt someone else. She felt a woman. And it felt like the woman was involved in a sudden violent fight over money. So the woman fled the home, and those were the hurried footsteps that they could have been hearing. It seemed that one was a bit more on the residual side. It seemed like that one was a bit more on the residual side, the clip-clopping of the heels. Helen was surprised. She revealed to the group that back in the day, there was in fact a really wild fight that occurred at the home between an oafish oil man with a younger wife and a friend of the oil man. But that was really the only details that she could offer. She just wanted whatever it was gone, and she wanted to live in peace. Now, I'll stop here for a second. She did ask her mom if there had ever been a death in the home, and the mom said that she suspected that someone may have died in the home while people were renting it out, but she could never prove it. So
how
there's
old
no
was
documents.
The home? How old was the home?
It didn't say. I know they moved out there in the 30s. So
more than likely, someone probably passed away in the home. Yeah,
right.
that's.
Well, you had said at the beginning that that her mom had bought it. What was it? 30 years prior.
Yeah, 30 years prior, and this is like the 60s, so it was bought in the 30s.
Oh, okay, so it was in the okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was getting those dates mixed up. My bad.
And Mrs. Bell said that someone had died there in 1934 and 1948. So I don't know. I mean, it could have happened if someone did die in the house in 1934. It could probably happen right before they bought the home. Right. I don't think they were ever able to substantiate that someone actually died in the house, if I remember right, like her mom said. Okay. So the group went into the bedroom, and Miss Bell stood in the center of the room, and the others made a circle around her, and they did a ritual called a rescue circle, which is essentially a verbal exorcism. They told the entities to leave, and once they felt confident that they did, the group thanked Helen for having them over and took their leave. Holzer finished up his LA trip and flew back home to New York City. But when he landed, he had a letter from Helen waiting on him, saying that whatever was in her house had not left at all, and in fact, the night that they left, she heard heavy footsteps return, walking into her dining room and into her kitchen. Helen got out of there as fast as she could and ran back to her room. And after this incident, Helen believed that she would never get rid of the spirits in her home. And the last Holzer heard, she couldn't wait for the day she was able to sell the house and move. So
that one was never followed up on after that, or if it was, he didn't write about it.
I think he may have later on down the line, but I didn't have. That's all that I know about that story. That's all I know about her.
Okay.
But. Yeah, I don't think they were ever able to substantiate that anybody actually had died in the home when she asked her mom. Because like I said, her mom said that she thinks it could have happened and she suspected that someone had died in the home, but she couldn't prove it. So that one's interesting. I don't know.
Like, did he give a take on it? Did he tell anything about his investigation in the story?
No, other than when he walked into the house, and they did the circle to get whatever out that was in there.
My question is that how did he determine that was what was necessary? That's I guess is what I'm curious about.
He didn't say, and I guess maybe he just knew, because she said she wanted peace and she wanted whatever it was gone. So I guess that's what he knew how to do.
He didn't even play with it. He was like, let's just try to make it
try to get rid of whatever it was.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, when you're selling houses or when you move into a house, kind of think about that, because you don't know what the hell happened there before.
Well, and technically, this is just from real estate standpoint. They do not, well, at least in the state of Texas, I'll say that you do not have to disclose that there's a death on the property if it is anything other, like, so if somebody dies on the property due to material defects of the property, then yes, you do have to disclose that. So if they walk out on a second floor balcony and the balcony collapses and they die from that, yes, you have to disclose that. But natural deaths, suicides, murders, all of that kind of stuff, nope.
Unless you're asked.
Do you know if you have to in the state of California?
I don't know about California. California is a little bit more, they want to make sure that kind of everything is like disclosed. Me personally, if I'm your realtor, or if I'm the realtor of the listing, you know, if I'm the listing agent and somebody's like, hey, we had, grandma die in the back bedroom. I'm going to be like, yeah, we might want to say something, because let's not walk down that road of potentially getting sued because we didn't say anything, people are real finicky about somebody dying in the property. Me, I don't care. I actively look for funeral homes to move into. Does not bother me.
Make sure I have a room.
Yours is the autopsy table.
Well, like the rental home that I grew up in was haunted. Like, we all had experiences in that house. And, like, we found out, I can't remember if the landlord ended up telling us or how we found out, but come to find out, someone did die in the front yard or the backyard. I can't remember which one it was, but somebody did die on the property. And, when we were moving in, they did not bother to disclose. So
if they didn't have to, then
no.
That's where you have to do your due diligence and find out what you need to find out and researching before you buy anything.
Right. We found out the hard way.
There actually is a property not property. There actually is a website that you can, I think it's called diedinhouse.com, I believe.
Okay.
diedinhouse.com. So you can go to that, and I believe I'm going to do it like right now. Let's put in my current address. Let's see, because I know that somebody did die in here.
Does it work?
So if you knew my address, you could put it in, because somebody did die in mine as well.
Oh, well, no, it doesn't say anything. But anyways, really? You can go into diedinhouse.com.
I wonder if it's
search.
Like, I wonder if it's like how protective are the state of Texas over records like that? I wonder if maybe it varies state by state.
That would be that's part of your death certificate.
Yeah, that's your death certificate. It's going to tell you where they died.
Oh, okay.
So they're going to tell you, it's going to tell you the place of death, whether it was in city, at your house, at a hospital. Anything like that. So that's going to be publicly listed. You can go look that up at the county clerk's record search. Just, go to the county clerk records and search by last name, first name, whatever. Pull the death certificate and you can see exactly where they died. So, I don't know. Yeah. So if you're ever suspicious and you're moving, go check out diedinhouse.com. I personally have a subscription because I'm a realtor. And I think it's fun. And
you have to buy it.
Whatever.
It's a subscription.
It's a subscription service.
Or you can just go to the county clerk's office and find out.
It'll be a lot harder.
Yeah.
That's
a lot of digging. Blake,
I think you. Oh yeah, I love to dig. I do all the the genealogy, not for like a death certificate or anything like that.
Why not? You can't search by an address if that was the place that they died.
That's probably not a searchable field. They're probably only going to search it by death certificate number, first name, last name, things like that. Date of death, date of birth. That'll probably be it. If you want to do a little digging, you can go to your county's appraisal district, find all the previous owners for your house, and then you could go dig their names. That would be the easiest way. Go to listen to me tell y'all, this is how I do it, because I do genealogy research as well. You want to know who's owned your house in the past? Go to your county's appraisal district, hit property search, type in your address, find your tax records, look at the very bottom. It's going to have a deed history. You're going to have all the previous owners of your house. Take those names, go to the county clerk's website, go to the death certificate area, click on that, and then search those names and see if anybody died in your house.
Would that apply to renters as well?
It could.
Okay.
Very well could. It just depends. I mean, your renters are not going to be on your deed history, obviously. Your deed is only going to be your owners. So it's going to have all your previous owners. So especially if you have a house that was like turn of the century, 1930s, whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Chances are someone died up in there. So just be
I know
extra
someone
careful.
died in here. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know someone died in here. I see crap in this house all the time.
Let me ask you a question. When you popped off for a minute, did you guys go look around the house to see if
Hell
somebody got
yeah, I
killed?
went to go look to freaking look. I mean, my thing is like, I can handle a ghost, a real life person. Hell no. Which, I mean, the little 5-pound Pomeranian terrier is in there. She would have alerted me if.
Did you hear something again?
Yes.
I didn't hear that one.
I didn't hear it that time.
What'd you hear?
I don't know.
What
Maybe those neighbors' loud ass dogs.
I don't know. I don't know. I have no idea.
Well, then, gentlemen, do you have any final thoughts? Because apparently Blake needs to go check his house.
He needs to go, figure out what the hell's going on in there.
No. It's all good. It's all good. I'm just gonna turn the volume up on this, and if y'all hear anything weird, just let me know. If you hear like la 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 in the background, just. But yeah, I mean that's. I mean, it's so true because here's the thing: you move into a house. That's one thing. I ain't gonna lie. As a realtor, when I'm helping a buyer. I've been asked that question a lot. You would think that it might not be a common question, but the amount of times that I'm touring through a house with somebody and they just look at me and go, "Did anybody die in here?" And you're like, "I don't know. That's a good question. That's a good question. I would have to do a little bit more digging. Luckily, I know how to dig and I know the websites where you can go to find it. So typically I'm able to find the answers for them. But yeah, I've been in a few my other favorite part is being a real estate agent when my coworkers don't want to go into a house to have pictures made or don't want to give a tour of the place because they think it creeps them out. They call me and they go, "Hey, there's this place with this really creepy freaking basement and I don't want to go in there and I just think something's in there. So do you want to go show this buyer this property?" Abso-freaking-lutely, I do.
Let's go.
Yeah, absolutely, I do, without a doubt.
Yeah.
So yeah,
cool.
That's property. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Well, the thing is about that last story is I can't imagine being in a home that is that haunted where you don't get a moment's peace. Like things are waking you up, pushing you into the bed, trying to fucking suffocate you and tapping on your furniture all night long.
Yeah.
Don't want to deal with that.
No, I mean, I talked about it many times on this podcast, being drug out of bed. I've been, that is the one place you don't mess with me. You don't mess with me in my bedroom. You don't mess with me in the shower. 2 places I'm most vulnerable and 99% of the time naked. So I only put clothes on whenever you two are here because I mean I'm gonna be naked. It's my house. Fuck y'all.
That's what I'm saying. At night, that's when the ghost show up is when you're naked. But yeah. So any final thoughts on the Hans Holzer stories, guys?
I absolutely
go ahead.
I was just gonna say I absolutely love Hans Holzer. I think that he is he always looked at everything from a very kind of skeptical point of view, scientific point of view. He tried to debunk as much as he possibly could. I appreciate a lot of the work that he did. So knowing that he's the one that wrote about these stories, I don't know, it always, something that about Hans Holzer, whenever I read one of his stories, there's always just this little bit more air of credibility to it. I'm not saying anybody else is any less credible, but his approach, I connect with it so well. So I'm fascinated by the man. So I appreciate you sharing these particularly because I know when you're having with entities are involved and stuff like that, he takes that crap very seriously.
He does.
So pretty fascinating. I absolutely love these stories tonight.
And I like these stories too. I'm not real happy to think that a ghost can stalk you from beyond the grave. Thanks a lot for that new piece of anxiety in my brain.
You're welcome.
But no, I really did like the stories. And again, I like Blake. I like Hans Holzer's approach to investigating.
Right.
So I like his use of all the tools that he has. He uses all the tools available. And then he tries to back up and research, which I really like. So yeah, good job. I enjoyed it.
Thanks. Appreciate it. I'm with you guys. I like his approach is very pragmatic. He is very into trying to single other things out before he can say yes or no. There's something going on in the house. These stories were some of the really fun ones to read. There are, as you could see how thick that book was, there are numerous more stories that we could cover from Hans Holzer. And as we go along, you never know what else we might do with Hans. So.
Absolutely.
And with that, Blake, why don't you tell them everything they need to know?
Absolutely. Well, After Dark with EVP seasons 1 and 2, they are now streaming on Paraflix Paranormal Plus, and have been for some while. Season 3 dropping this Thursday, October 24th, 2024. Yeah. Our first episode is already being pushed out. It is uploaded and ready to drop this Thursday. We're going to have Dana Stricker, psychic medium Dana Stricker.
And she's
absolutely fantastic to have on. She talks about her experiences and her connections with the paranormal world, as well as her mediumship and psychic abilities. So she's fantastic to have on. Her cat accidentally kicked her out of the studio in the middle of it. So we
that was great. Yeah.
Cut that portion out and just kept rolling with it. It was really funny. So don't miss all those the extra evidence that is on there. Never before seen footage, exclusive interviews, again, only on Paraflix Paranormal Plus for After Dark with EVP. You can watch Paraflix on Amazon Fire, Roku TV, Apple TV, iOS, and Google Play. You want to make sure you use the link in our show notes. That's also going to be posted to our Facebook tomorrow morning, which is Wednesday, to sign up. That code is After Dark 25 for 25% off your annual subscription. Takes it down like $37.50 or somewhere in there. Also included in that link, we're going to post to our Facebook page tomorrow morning, or Wednesday morning, is our Patreon page. Our Patreon is the fastest and easiest way to directly support the show. For just $5 a month, you will unlock over 400 exclusive videos, which is content you are never going to see anywhere else. And your support from this directly helps us to keep you. I'm going to give up on this one day. Your support directly helps keep bringing those ghostly adventures week after week. And best of all, this price is never going to change. With that, you currently get our pre and post broadcast shows. That is the 30 minutes before and the 30 minutes after this live episode, where we share way too much Y'all hear me every week. We share way too much shit on the Patreon.
You'll enjoy it.
You'll enjoy it.
You'll like
it. Unedited investigation footage as well. We offer that 70 free trial. My God, I didn't even leave tonight.
7-day free trial.
Hello, 7-day free trial.
And don't forget, we offer that 7-day free trial, so you can check it all out before committing. But so come on over and join us on Patreon. It's the dark side where the cookies are held. So we have no more public things this year, do we? We are done.
No.
We had this one at Old Park this weekend, but it's sold out. Sorry, It's been sold out for quite some time. So this is. But
watch the Eventbrite page, because you never know when we're going to start scheduling our next ones, and that'll be the first place where you can find them.
Absolutely.
Well, make sure you're following us on all those social media channels. Just search everything Vaguely Paranormal. Look for that green sound wave. We are across the board. And for you audio listeners, remember you can catch us live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. on Facebook and YouTube. We want to thank everybody for your support, all those likes, comments, shares, and downloads. That also helps keep the spooky going. So make sure you share us, tell a friend about us, all of that kind of stuff. And remember, if you have any questions, comments, stories, or anything you want to share with us, those can be sent to the evppod@gmail.com. That is THEEVPPOD@gmail.com.
Go like, share, and make sure you hit that subscribe button on the YouTube page. Please, everybody go and do that.
So for everything Vaguely Paranormal, I am Ryan Roberts. These are my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Miss Shelley Pruitt. And we will see y'all next Tuesday.
Bye-bye.